Welcome, everyone. I'm Liz Koch, the producer of the Brooklyn Book Festival. Thank you for joining us for the next edition of Secrets of the Stacks. It's an ongoing series of programs that focuses on the library collections of cultural institutions. Today's garden edition focuses on botanical gardens and their library collections. We have done this program together for a number of festivals now, together with Bloomberg Connects. We're thrilled to have them as a partner. And also we're part of their app. So we get featured as part of the Bloomberg Connects app. We're very appreciative of that support. The Brooklyn Book Festival takes place each fall in downtown Brooklyn. It's a 9-day festival overall. It launches this year on September 22nd with our virtual festival day that allows us to include authors and audiences who otherwise could not attend the festival. The following weekend on September 28th is our Children's Day on Saturday, and we welcome authors and illustrators and performers who do different types of activities, readings, performances with children. The following day is our very celebratory festival day and literary marketplace in downtown Brooklyn. It's the largest book market on the East Coast with more than 200 publishers, and we have 8 stages of author conversations going throughout the day from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. If that isn't enough, throughout the week in all 5 boroughs, we do literary events called bookend events, and they range from literary trivia to poetry in canoes to discussions with authors. So we hope you'll join us for some or all of these events that take place from September 22nd to September 30th in the fall. Now I would like to introduce Alex Costas from Bloomberg Connects, and he will launch the program and introduce the rest of the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Liz, and definitely mark your calendars. The festival is terrific. It's a wonderful way to spend a day in Brooklyn. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I know we have folks dialing in from all over the world. Thanks for joining us today. As Liz mentioned, my name is Alex Costas, and I'm with the team from Bloomberg Connects. Bloomberg Connects is a free app that gives you access to digital guides to nearly 500 museums, libraries, botanic gardens, historic houses, and other cultural spaces around the world. You can use the app when you're on site to get that enhanced experience, or you can use it from home, anywhere, anytime. We are incredibly proud supporters of the Brooklyn Book Festival, and as we were just talking about earlier, before the session, we've been talking about this session specifically for over a year now, and we're thrilled to be launching this and having this take place with all of you. To kick things off, I'm going to introduce the moderator of our discussion, Rhonda Evans, who is the director of the LuEsther T. Mertz Library at the York Botanical Garden. Rhonda has been with NYBG for a little over a year now, having previously been at the New York Public Library, where she was the assistant chief librarian at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture. Rhonda has written for multiple library publications and is very active within the museum and library profession. She also has taught at the MLIS program at Pratt Institute and is also a veteran of the festival, having participated in our Secret of the Stacks panel last fall. With that, welcome Rhonda, and take us away.
Thanks, Alex, for that very nice introduction. I'm so happy to be participating in the Brooklyn Book Festival again this year for Secrets of the Stacks. And I want to welcome all of you to this year's program, Secrets of the Stacks Garden Edition. During this hour, you will learn about the 3 important libraries, all associated with gardens. And we will begin our program today with some wonderful presentations by our panelists. One of our panelists, my colleague, is having a bit of technical difficulties, so hopefully he will join us at some point during the program. But we're going to get started with Chris Hughes. I would like to introduce Chris. Chris is the Assistant Curator of Natural Sciences and Nature Love Project at the Horniman Museum and Gardens. Chris studied for his Bachelor in Science in Zoology at Queen Mary University of London and a Master's of Science in Taxonomy and Biodiversity at Imperial College London, in conjunction with the Natural History Museum, where he has previously worked as an assistant curator. So Chris, I'll turn it over to you for your presentation.
Well, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. And it's so wonderful to be on the panel and to actually be a part of this wonderful, wonderful program. So I'm just going to hopefully share my screen and I will go through. So the Horniman Museum and Garden is situated in southeast London in a place called Forest Hill. And, oh, yep, hopefully we've got that now. And I just want to kind of basically get straight in and talk about the specimens and what we have in the museum. So, oh, there we go. So this is just a basic image of photographs of our library collection. So the library is built on the historical library that Frederick Horniman himself created, and then has developed throughout the years to also include more modern pieces, so more recent books, journals, and other acquisitions, as well as this historical finding. These images here, this one in particular, is basically just lovely photographs of books that are all relevant to natural history. There we go. So the herbarium collection that we have, the natural history collection in general contains a lot of different representations from the natural world, including shells, fossils, taxidermy, as well as skeletal material, pinned insects, and geology samples and herbarium collections. So this is, again, just a very small amount that we actually have in the museum. The herbaria collection consists of two types of material. So we have loose leaf herbaria, which is what we have here on the right, and then bound book herbaria collections. And it's the bound books that I'm going to be talking about today. So these books were originally housed with the rest of the library collection, but were eventually transferred over to the care of the natural history curators, becoming a vital research part of our collection, as well as actually boosting the material that we had in the herbarium collection to a much wider amount that we have. And the majority of the books come from around about the early to mid 1800s. These were created and collected by both scientists as well as amateur and hobbyist collectors, who then eventually donated the collections to us. During this period, the early to mid 1800s, collecting had become incredibly popular. It was sort of becoming popular at the end of the 18th century, but coming into the sort of early and mid 1800s, as I said, it became a lot more impressive. And it was opening up for a lot of different people who were normally excluded from the higher science studies. Okay, so as you can see, these two slides here, I'm just going to jump in between the two of them because they're basically just beautiful, and I kind of just want to show you as much of them as possible. There are a few major collecting crazes that happened during this era, and they were predominantly centered around the collecting of plants. These crazes were based around localized collecting or domestic collecting. So having a lot of money really wasn't that much of an importance, and being able to travel huge distances wasn't that important either. With the British Isles being surrounded by the sea, seaweed was a perfect collection, and it became a very fashionable and perfect pastime for young ladies, as it was seen as a safely sorry, getting a bit dry-mouthed, safely domesticated and a romantic way to explore the natural world. Seaweed scrapbooks like these, this one here on screen and this one here, were the results of this collecting. And they were seen as aesthetically pleasing, educational, and morally beneficial. Queen Victoria herself was known to make seaweed albums when she was a young lady. So there were, as I said, there were a few crazes that went on. And one of the next crazes was the fern craze. So this is one of my favorite books, and the next one as well is one of my favorite books. They are opposites of each other. The specimens displayed in the first one, the one that's on the screen now, is displayed in a very artistic manner, while the other one that I'll show you later could be seen as an index catalogue, maybe, for the plant life of the British Isles. Again, same periods, and we're talking about these fern crazes. Basically, people were just going out into the environment. They were going out into the countryside of England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland, and just collecting these ferns and trying to collect as many rare and unique species and specimens. So this book is stunning, to be honest. The specimens, their names are written in red ink. There is gold embellishments. All the fern decorations are real ferns. And it's just amazing to think about the person who sat down and painstakingly put this all together, which ferns were going to go with which ferns, and how they were going to represent the beauty and dynamicism of the fern collection that they'd got. It's just stunning, and the book is full of pages like this, and I could go on about it for days, to be honest. But I'm very aware that we've got a lot to talk about today, so I will go on to the next one, which is equally, if not aesthetically beautiful, but beautiful in another way. This book is the Specimens of the British Plants. It's more scientific, as I said. Firstly, it contains a much wider selection of plants, plant species, so ranging from plant taxa that you don't see in any of the other collections. It is, again, beautiful to behold, especially the way the title page here is just illustrated, is stunning. Again, from the same era, this one actually has a stamp in it that says it's from 1857, I think. And the book and its collections are a great source of data that we have at our fingertips. We can use them as a resource in researching how in the last 200 years species ranges may have changed, or how their DNA has altered to cope with climate change. There are a lot of examples of bound books that we have in the herbaria. These are just a very small group of them, but they are amazing. I could talk about, as I said, them for forever. And they are wonderful pieces to also help us with how herbaria are so important, that they represent the natural world around us at a snapshot of time, but they also are able to enlighten us in the cultural trends that we see rising every so often. A prime example of that is actually the rise of the indoor houseplant collection. And I don't know if you can see that much behind me, but I am an avid houseplant collector. And once I stop sharing this screen, you'll be able to see that a little better. But yeah, it's just so much information. They are beautiful, and we are just so happy to have them, and just want to be able to get them out there and get other people aware of what we have. My plants.
That was amazing. Thanks, Chris. It was beautiful to see. We have some of those in our collection at NYBG as well, and it's just they're lovely, and to see them up close and how some of them still retain all their wonderful textures and colors.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, that was a beautiful presentation, and thank you for sharing those with us. Joel is next. Our second presenter, Dr. Joel Klein, stewars the history of medicine and pre-1800 science collections at the Huntington Library, where he has worked for 6 years. Joel, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thanks so much, and it's a pleasure to be with everybody here today. So I'm hailing from the Huntington Library in San Marino. And just going to tell you about some of our botanical books. Here's where we're at in Southern California, just outside of Los Angeles, near Pasadena. So do come visit us if you're in the area. Most people know the Huntington for our gardens. Pictured here, you see the Japanese garden, and then part of our California garden. We have many other gardens. Also for our art, this is our famous Blue Boy. What many people don't realize is that we are also one of the largest and most active independent research libraries in the United States. So this is our Special Collections reading room. We give away about $2 million a year in fellowships for people to come work in our collections. And then anyone who's 18 years old or above can get a reader's card to work in our special collections. So yeah, we have 130 acres with 83,000 living plants. We also have an herbarium with 10,000 specimens. But beyond that, we also have rare manuscripts, books, archival collections, approximately 12 million items. I'm going to show you like 4. So it's just the tip of the iceberg. So this is one of our medieval manuscripts from the 15th century. It's an English manuscript. It is an herbal as well as a recipe book. So at the Huntington, I mostly curate our medical collections and our history of medicine items. So this item has plants, recipes, no illustrations, but still an extraordinary item. We also have one of the largest collections of 15th century books in the country, second only to the Library of Congress. And here you see a rare 1499 edition of the Garten der Gesundheit, an incunable, meaning a book printed prior to 1501. And here it has some lovely hand-colored woodcut illustrations. Just as far as the medical and scientific books or the scientific incunables go, we have about just over 600 of them. And it's an underutilized collection that I'm always happy to see people working in. If you're interested in these, many of them have recently been digitized. They are up on the Huntington Digital Library, which you can visit at hdl.huntington.org. We also digitized a number of almanacs, broadsides, and we're continually adding to the collections. And then another important area of collection strength for us is early English printed items. So the first you see here is the Great Herbal, and this is from 1526, rare. Sorry, this is 1639 edition. Actually, no, we do have a 1639 edition. This is yeah, this is the earlier one. And then the second is John Gerard's Herbal from 1633 with the beautiful illustrations that are hand-colored. We also have a variety of botanical texts by women. This is Elizabeth Blackwell's Curious Herbal. The first image there is of saffron, which we do have growing in the Huntington Gardens. The second is rosemary. I have the saffron here because I did a fun exercise with some teachers as a part of a teacher training event a few years ago, where we reconstructed recipes for making yellow dye and yellow paint. And the one pictured on the right there is actually medieval recipe for making pigment and paint from saffron, which we harvested from the gardens. Actually, also, I bought some on Amazon. It was a lot easier to do than harvesting it all. So that's one thing that we do with the books, but also we have many people researching here. We also have people doing scientific work in the botanical gardens. For instance, a cryopreservation lab. The gardens are just one big experiment. They're regularly using the botanical collections. Actually, the botanical division has their own library. This is one of the books from it. It just happens to be the latest book that I've seen from that collection, these lovely orchids. So like I mentioned, we have many other items here. These are just some of the things that you can find here. And if you are interested, you look us up hdl.huntington.org to see some of our digital collections. And if you're in the area, you can come by and look into getting a reader's card. That's it.
Thank you, Joel. That was also a wonderful presentation. I love seeing the Elizabeth Blackwell A Curious Herbal is such a great work. And I know that there was a popular work that was also published around that, and also just to see some of your botanical art. And it's great to also note that it is digitized, which is so more people can access that. So that's wonderful. So unfortunately, my colleague has not been able to join us for technical difficulties, but I do have his presentation. So I can go over that with you, and you'll get to learn a little bit more about the Mertz Library. So I have his notes and we'll go over it. Okay, great. So the New York Botanical Garden has been a connective hub among people, plants, and the planet since 1891. We're rooted in the cultural fabric of New York City, here in the heart of the Bronx, its greenest borough. For more than 130 years, we've invited millions of visitors to make the garden a part of their lives, exploring the joy, beauty, and the respite of nature. Next slide, please. NYBG's 250 acres are home to renowned exhibitions, immersive botanical experiences, art, and music, and events with some of the most influential figures in plant science, horticulture, and the humanities. We're also stewards of globally significant research collections, including the LuEsther T. Mertz Library and the William and Linda Steer Herbarium. Next slide, please. At NYBG, we're plant people, dedicated horticulturalists, enthusiastic educators, and scientific adventurers, committed to helping nature thrive so that humanity can thrive. We believe in our ability to make things better, teaching tens of thousands of kids and families each year about the importance of safeguarding our environment and healthy eating. Next slide. Our expert scientists work across the city and the nation and the globe to document the plants and fungi of our world and find actionable, nature-based solutions to our plants' dual climate and biodiversity crises. Our eyes are always looking forward as we train the next generation of botanists, gardeners, landscape designers, and environmental stewards, ensuring a green future for all. Next slide. The New York Botanical Garden is an advocate for the plant world. The garden pursues its missions through its role as a museum of living plant collections arranged in gardens and landscapes across its National Historical Landmark site. Through its comprehensive educational programs and exhibitions in horticulture and plant science, and through the wide-ranging research programs and outstanding collections of the International Plant Science Center. Next slide, please. The LuEsther T. Mertz Library opened to the public in 1900. Oh, and Stephen is here.
Yes, I am.
Okay, Stephen, do you want to take over now?
To get my script.
Okay, I can keep going if you'd like.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Yes.
and then you can, sure. Okay. The LuEsther T. Mertz Library opened to the public in 1900 and has always served as the library of record for the entire New York metropolitan region in the subject areas of botany, horticulture, landscape design, and allied fields. It holds over 750,000 book volumes and 16,000 journals in 97 languages, and holds materials ranging from the 12th century to the present. Additionally, the library has a 1,000-square-foot exhibit gallery devoted to the ongoing series of exhibits interpreting its treasures to the public. And next slide. The Mertz Library is a founding member of the Biodiversity Heritage Library, which is a consortium of the world's natural history libraries that are digitizing their collections. We have added some 4,500 titles from our collections, and we are also digitizing fragile and oversized materials in-house in our Mertz Digital Library. We have also been digitizing materials from the garden's archives, which house over 1.5 miles of materials in many formats ranging from memorabilia, artwork, scrapbooks, minutes, photographs, research notes, correspondence, and awards, which highlight the work of garden staff and programs, as well as outstanding American gardeners and botanists. Next slide. In addition to overseeing the garden's archives, the Mertz Library holds some 36 separate special collections, including postage stamps, landscape designs, posters, photographs, and original botanical artwork. Being open to the public, the Mertz Library received visitors from across the country and around the globe. In addition to working with the garden's scientific staff, students in its education program and children's program, home gardeners have very important resource in the Mertz Library's Plant Information Office, which answers all sorts of questions about horticulture, sourcing, pest, indication and plant uses. Library staff have created hundreds of research guides on various popular garden topics in the library's special collections. Next slide. Blog posts from library staff are regularly featured on the garden's website, focusing in on objects from its collections. The library also produces a seasonal newsletter, along with regular small exhibits and weekly lectures on science and humanities-based topics in pursuit of its educational mission. Throughout the year, librarians provide tours of the library space for members, distinguished visitors, professional groups, open houses, and classes, introducing many items from its varied collections. And I think that's the presentation. Oh,
Yes.
there's one more slide here of our library building. All right. Well, thank you for putting together such a wonderful presentation, Stephen. And so I'm going to go ahead and introduce you, and then we'll get into our conversation. So as I mentioned, Stephen Sinon is my colleague, and he is also the William B. O'Connor Curator of Special Collections, Research and Archives, and has been on staff at the Garden for the past 25 years. Stephen is a graduate of Columbia University School of Library Service. He also serves on the board of the Council for Botanical and Horticultural Libraries. And now we are going to get into our discussion. So thank you all again for all these wonderful presentations about your libraries. And many people are not familiar with botanical libraries or natural science libraries. So I'm sure everyone is interested to learn how you kind of found your way into this profession, into this current role, and maybe tell us a bit more about what you do in your library. So maybe we'll start with Joel.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. I started out in my undergrad doing chemistry and had no idea what I wanted to do. Ended up getting a PhD in the history of science, Indiana University. And I found my way I caught the book bug as a graduate student at Indiana University, largely because of the Lilly Library. And I was very fortunate to have a professor who was a book lover and took me on regular expeditions to the Lilly. And then I was able to co-curate an exhibition on the history of medical books and anatomy books in the 17th century at the Lilly. So it's just kind of thrown into the deep end, which is the best thing to do to your students. But it was wonderful. I got to know books, and then I had a postdoc at Columbia University where it was largely about the materiality of science, which included a lot about books. So we worked closely with conservators. So I had a lot of hands-on experience with books, and we did all sorts of wacky stuff like practicing gilding using 16th century methods from a French book of secrets. This was a project called the Making and Knowing Project, if anyone is interested in that. And then, yeah, I ended up at the Huntington, where I've been having a great time.
And what are some of the work that you do at the Huntington?
So being a curator, I wear like 12 different hats. I do everything from acquisitions, and I buy items, and I seek items for donation. I do that as well as exhibitions and giving show and tells to student groups and working with donors, and 15 other things. At the moment, I'm working on many different exhibitions, some of which include publications, and then also working on a couple of bigger acquisitions. So that's what I'm doing now, but what I'll be doing 2 months from now, we'll see.
So many hats that you wear, and also your history is kind of a great melding of natural science and science and the book world and the literary world. That's wonderful. Stephen, do you want to tell us a little bit about how you got into this field and at the Mertz Library and a little bit about what you do?
Sure. Well, I started out, my undergraduate degree is in German translation and multinational corporate studies, which is basically international business. And from there, I went to graduate school at Columbia University and got my library science degree. And I worked at a number of libraries, Avery Library at Columbia University, which is the finest architectural library in the Western world, and the School of Visual Arts, the United Nations, the New York Times, doing the reference desk, the research telephones there, until I came to Fordham University and I found that the grass was greener at the garden. And so I ended up at the garden, and that's been 25 years ago. So I have a very varied background in a number of types of libraries, and I've even done some freelance work in corporate and private libraries as well. So what I do at the LuEsther T. Mertz Library is very similar to what Joel does. I'm also in charge of dealing with our product development team, which leverages images from our rare book and folio collections to help create products that are exclusively sold around the world to benefit the coffers of the New York Botanical Garden. And I'm also the archivist at the New York Botanical Garden, and we are currently working on a grant, which is a 4-year project, to hire 2 processing archivists to work with the processing the backlog of organizational records that we have accumulated in the past 25 years at the New York Botanical Garden archives.
Yes, big project, lots of hats as well. And Chris, tell us a little bit about your journey and what you do at the Horniman.
Yeah, certainly. So my journey is slightly different. I volunteered for years at the Natural History Museum in London, and then developed doing my degrees and was able to get a proper job there. So always volunteer if you can, wherever you can, try and volunteer. It's always incredibly helpful. And I became a member of the Bibliophile Society in London for a couple of years, for as long as that ran. And then when I ended up at the Horniman 2 years ago, I was really brought over to start working on the Nature and Love program, which is our redevelopment program for the outside gardens. We're recreating 2 new garden areas and a cafe. And also we're redeveloping the Natural History Gallery within the museum itself. So I've been working a lot on selecting specimens for that, writing and researching labels and what we would like to say, the topics that we're really interested in, and how we want to get our sort of messages across and the best way to do that. So there's been a lot of research on that sort of side, which is what got me into the natural history and into specifically the herbarium collection. We are looking at how basically weeds have gone from these terrible, terrible things that everyone wants to get rid of in their garden to now the most amazing, beneficial, best friends of the gardener. So that story is really, really interesting. And it's what I've been doing a lot with this domestic collecting herbarium collections.
That's very interesting. Weeds is always an interesting topic. What used to be a weed, what's no longer a weed. So that's a really interesting work that you're doing. And thank you all for sharing your journeys with us and kind of getting a bit more back to the collections. Each of your libraries have very unique and specialized collections. Can you tell us a bit of maybe about how they started and how are you continuing to grow and develop those collections? Maybe we'll start with you, Stephen.
Sure. We began the collections in the 1890s. And a number of area libraries in the New York City region donated materials to start the beginnings of the collection. We opened to the public in 1900 with 7,000 volumes of books and journals. And in the early days of the garden, there was a special book buying fund that was created, and that allowed the librarians to build up the core of the collection by buying all of the standards, including many rare book and folio titles. And through the years, a number of enlightened donors have given the Mertz Library their own collections, looking for a home for them. And so strength has been built upon strength, and the collection is now recognized for its humanistic depth as well as its scientific depth. And so there's a number of interdisciplinary researchers that we house in the library through the Humanities Institute, which is a Mellon-sponsored program. And there are a number of researchers who just contact us from around the globe and walk in the door, as well as the staff and students in the gardens programs who we service the needs of. We're continuing to build the collections with whatever funding that we have available. We'd like to fill in gaps that we know exist in areas that are weak. We'd like to add some more Asian and Middle Eastern materials. We'd like to add more materials relating to women and people of color to help build in those areas that were not as extensively collected in the past.
Thanks, Stephen. That's great. And Joel, tell us a little bit about maybe the beginning of your collection and how you're continuing to build it and grow.
So the Huntington, the core of the collections were formed by Henry E. Huntington, who was an entrepreneur, railroad magnate, etc. And he was a major book collector. The Huntington is often called the Library of Libraries, largely because Mr. Huntington purchased entire libraries and brought them to the Huntington. Many of these were from Great Britain. So we are now one of the best places outside of the UK to study British history. But the library continued to make purchases and get donations in the years after he died. And then we continue that today. So in 2006, we took in the Burnby Library, which is one of the largest collections in the history of science and technology in the world. So 47,000 rare volumes, 20,000 reference works, 1,000 scientific objects, and then linear miles of archival collections. We also have the collections of the Los Angeles County Medical Association, and then many, many other collections. You know, I continue to take in collections. 3 years ago or so, I brought in through donation Bruce Fye's collection, which is the largest collection of cardiovascular history that was held in private hands. So yeah, if people are listening, have items that might be appropriate for us, find my contact information.
Yes, donation is always a very important part of building these collections throughout the years. And Chris, tell us a little bit more about the Horniman's collections and how they were originated, how they continue to grow.
Certainly. So our collections originally came from Frederick Horniman, who was a tea owner. He went around and collected and produced his own types of tea. He was very interested in collecting. He just wanted to know everything about all different cultures and all different aspects of the natural and also the anthropological world. We have one of the largest musical instrument collections in, I think, the world. But when it comes to the natural history collection, just because unfortunately we are redeveloping the gallery, we have tried to stop getting collections coming in at the moment. We are hopefully working with our volunteers from the communities around us to try and produce modern herbaria sheets from our own gardens. So we're going to be utilizing the actual living collection that we have in the gardens to influence the collections that we have behind the scenes. And they're going to be used throughout the gallery redisplay as well. So they're going to be an actual ongoing aspect of the gardens and of the gallery. So they'll be talking to each other continually.
Thanks, Chris. And I should mention for Stephen, our library was also kind of started by one person, which was Nathaniel Lord Britton, the botanist, who also co-founded the New York Botanical Garden. His personal library was also kind of the foundation of NYBG. So it's kind of these key figures that helped to build these really important libraries. But Chris, you brought up a really important point that I wanted to ask all of you about. So all of our libraries are connected to these gardens, or what we might refer to as the living collections, the plants out on the ground that everyone gets to interact with. So how do your library collections influence or kind of inform the work that's happening with the living collections, or vice versa? And I'll let anyone kind of start who would like to answer that.
Well,
Chris, go ahead, Stephen.
at the LuEsther T Mertz Library, we work very closely with the garden's herbarium staff, and we always meet the needs of any research materials they have in the archives, special collections, or through interlibrary loan, whatever that would be. When we do exhibitions, we usually try and include some aspect of the herbarium. Oftentimes, we put herbarium specimens in the gallery next to the books for public interpretation. There are several venues for galleries that are available in the library building. It's not all under the control of the library. So the herbarium does have an opportunity to do outreach. And of course, they have digitized a number of their specimens online. And so that's a very important outreach platform as well for them. Chris?
Thanks, Stephen. And Chris, tell us a little bit more about what you were talking about in terms of how the living collections are informing the other collections in your library.
Certainly. So we recently had a tea exhibition called Chai, Cha, and Tea. And from that, we were able to get some, now wait, I have to remember what the actual tea is. It's sinensis, the tea plant anyway. So we have some of that, and we are actually going to be adding that into our collection as well as sort of our rewilding gardening plans that we're going to be doing. We're going to be utilizing them as well for the collection to build that up and to really allow the collection to speak to the rest of the museum.
Thanks, Chris. And Joel, yes, tell us how the library is connected with the garden and how you had that relationship.
So we work very closely with our colleagues in the botanical division. There's, for instance, a curator of the Chinese garden, curator of the desert garden, rose garden, etc. So we work carefully, closely with them to serve our researchers. I send many people their way if they have questions that my colleagues might be able to answer. But also on exhibitions, we have exhibitions coming up for this Los Angeles initiative called Pacific Standard Time. We have 2 exhibitions going up, and one is going to be related to the Chinese garden, and then another, which is about the history of interest in changing climate in the 19th century, called Storm Cloud. I think most interesting to me is what we've done with avocados. So the Huntington has a really important place in the history of the avocado in the United States. Henry Huntington apparently loved them. They were called alligator pears in the early 20th century. And our archives have important, so our archives in the library have important information about the history of avocados here. And this is being used by people interested in saving avocados and people in the avocado industry, which I'm not financially invested in, but I am invested in making sure that avocados are going to be around so that I can eat them. So that's just a couple things, ways that we work with botanical.
Thanks for that. And another kind of related question is, having a library that covers the natural sciences, that covers botanical history, these are really, really kind of important areas that impact the rest of the world, impact current areas in science. So in your opinion, why do you think these type of libraries, botanical natural libraries, are so important kind of outside of these very specialized areas? Why do you think these type of libraries really matter in the work that is being done today, whether it's your independent researcher, your student, or someone who's have major degrees in a specialized field? And I'll let anyone take that question.
We're really interested in utilizing ancient DNA and seeing how specimens that we have actually changed through the process of climate change and how that's really affecting them. A lot of our collections, especially the herbaria ones, come from around about the, as I said, the sort of early and mid 1800s, which is the sort of start of the real industrialization of the British Isles. So all that kind of pollutant and all that effect, how then the specimens and the species, their ranges have changed, where the collections were originally collected from. Are those specimens still there? Do they still have habitat there that they could go back to? There's a lot of conversation that we have with rewilding, which we're getting a lot in the UK and a lot in Europe. And knowing where exactly specimens came from, where they grew to, where their ranges reached up to, really is quite informative and helps us to produce a great foundation for rewilding, say, insects or mammals, some of those higher trophic levels. You really need to have the under level first for them to really get settled in. We're hoping to be able to use that and utilize that a lot with the rest of the world.
Great, thanks. What about you, Stephen? Tell us a little bit about the Mertz and how it impacts other parts of the world.
Well, one of the strengths and that we're currently interested in researching is food security. And so we've worked very closely with the Mellon Foundation that is sponsoring scholars who are researching in the library related to food history and culture. We're also, of course, very interested and invested in climate change and its effects on the plant world. And so the library's collections become very, very important in these studies because we offer historical documentation that's very much needed as a basis for comparison, both in the herbarium collections to see what was collected where and when. And as Chris said, if it's still there and has it gone extirpated or extinct or any changes that may have occurred. And so, so the library's collections are crucial when we talk about these subjects.
So we at the Huntington have also turned our attention recently to food and sustainability. So they recently planted a ranch garden, which is largely about growing different types of food and water preservation. There's one employee at the Huntington whose sole role is just water. He's the most interesting person to talk to here. Really has extraordinary stories and insights about water. Then beyond what I've talked about, also with cryopreservation and the various science that's happening at the Huntington. Here in the library, we're largely about giving people access to these special collections so that they can tell stories that haven't been told. Just in the past year, I've worked with people who are doing research on heritage plants and plants native to Southern California. Likewise, I've had an interest recently in plants that were used as universal medicines and have been looking into plants used as panaceas by some Native American tribes in Southern California. So yeah, every day there's a new topic, and I think a lot of them have importance beyond the walls of the Huntington.
Thanks, Joel. And before we turn it over to our guests who might have some questions for you all, I just want to, I'm sure everyone is curious, how can they access your collections, use the collections in your library? So what's the best way to find out more information if someone wants to use the collections? Chris, you want to start us?
Yeah, please, by all means, if you're capable, come down and see us at the museum itself in Forest Hill. If not, you can always contact myself or the other curators, as well as contacting the library staff as well, who are very, very happy to have conversations with you. We also have archivists who will be able to answer all the questions that you have. So yeah, by all means, just contact us at the Horniman, and yeah, we will try and answer as many questions as we can as quickly as possible for you.
And Chris, are some of your collections accessible digitally?
We do have some digital ones. We are going to be pushing more towards digitization. It hasn't been in the forefront for the natural history collection. We were really looking more at digitizing predominantly our anthropology and our music collections. So they're a lot more digitized than the natural history collection. But that is something that we are looking into ourselves.
Great. And Joel, how can visitors or researchers access the Huntington?
So from afar, you can visit us at hdl.huntington.org to see the Huntington Digital Library and a few 100,000 items that we have digitized of the 12 million items in our collections. We also have a couple things up on archive.org. We also have many lectures that can be consulted online. But also, you know, the digital collections are great. You should come and visit the physical space at some point. We have exhibitions that are available and open to the public. And then anyone who's 18 years old or older can get a reader's card if they're interested and have a research project to work in our special collections.
Great, thank you. Stephen?
And I echo the same sentiment. You should come to the LuEsther T. Mertz Library in person and enjoy the garden and its collections. We do have two digital libraries. The first one is in-house for fragile and rare materials. It's the Mertz Digital Library. We've got a lot of interesting digital photographs up there. There's maps, there's all sorts of things. And then the other one is we're a founding member of the Biodiversity Heritage Library, which is a consortium of the world's major natural history libraries digitizing material from their library collections. So we've added over 5,000 books and journals, and it's available 24/7, free to anyone in the world. We've also begun to add archival materials as well to the collections that you'll find there. And I do also want to plug our plant information office. It's a very important service that anybody can contact by email. And if you come to the garden in person, you can speak with somebody about your plants, which is a lot more than you get at Home Depot these days, isn't it? And so it's a really great service if you're looking to source a plant or what's wrong with it or how to identify something. It's a free service to the public. And you can get to that online at plant information at nybg.org, and the libraries at Mertz Library. You can Google that.
Thanks, Stephen. So yes, the chat is open. If you have any questions for our panelists today, please include them in the chat. I do see one, which I think might be more directed towards the Mertz, is how are you related to the New York Public Library?
We are not. We are, in fact, older than the New York Public Library. We were founded many years before they started. And if you are a member of the New York Public Library, you have to register separately at the Mertz Library.
Okay, any other questions for our panelists? I don't see any currently, but we do have just a couple of minutes. So I think, oh wait, here's one. Stephen, can you please repeat the information regarding the Biodiversity Heritage Library?
Oh yes, the Biodiversity Heritage Library is available to anyone online. You can Google that, BHL Library, Biodiversity Heritage Library, and that will get you in contact with all of the digital content that's there. I do have a question for Joel. You mentioned all of those large collections that you were processing. Where do you put everything? Is it all on site?
Everything is on site here, yeah. That is one of the benefits of having 130 acres. But we just have various storage spaces, stack spaces. We are going to be undergoing a major construction project over the coming years where some of our stack spaces are going to be leaving and then they will be rebuilt. So we have a team that's actually called the Tetris team, who is involved in moving everything around and finding space for things. So yeah, even though we are on 130 acres, we don't have unlimited space, and there is a limit to the amount of things that we can responsibly take in.
Okay, I'm seeing a couple of different questions, and we only have about 4 minutes. So I think what we'll do is there's a question for Chris, which is, you have books of seaweed and ferns. Is there a particular plant that you'd like to see a dried collection of?
So I would love to see a proper dried collection of orchids. I think that'd be a truly beautiful and impressive collection. I don't know how they would be able to properly keep the form and all the beauty of them, but I'd really truly love to see what that looked like.
And then I think this is kind of a great place to end us, is a quick lightning round of your favorite, if you can name a favorite or something that you love to show people, favorite item in your collection. We'll start with Joel.
Gosh, favorite item in the collection. It's not, it isn't, it doesn't have anything to do with plants. But behind me, you can see there's a hand right there. That's an X-ray of an individual who shot himself in the hand. So there are little dots all through it. And it's actually one of the first medical X-rays that was used. It was taken to a surgeon, and all of the little pieces of shot were removed from his hand. So it's the best conversation piece in my office.
Thanks, Joel. Stephen, how about your favorite item, if you can think of one in the Mertz?
I get asked this question all the time, and I just tell everybody I love all my children. I'm not partial to any. They all have wonderful stories to tell. And really, our collections have something for everybody. Everybody you can imagine who would come step forward in the library, there's always going to be something that will speak directly to them.
Right, including children's books and over 7,000 plant-based cookbooks as well.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. Chris, what about you? Can you think of a favorite item?
I can't narrow it down to just one item. Like everyone else, it's very difficult to do that. But I would definitely have to say our shell collection. As a mollusk person through and through, I can talk about shells and mollusks till the cows come home. So they would be the ones that I would show everyone.
Well, thank you. And there was a question about, is the program being recorded? Perhaps our organizers can confirm. I do believe we're recording the program. I'm not sure when and where it will be posted, but I want to thank all of our panelists today for joining us and telling us so much about your wonderful libraries and gardens and museums. I'd like to thank all of our guests who joined us today. And please do go online to explore the library and the websites for the Horniman Museum and Gardens, the Huntington, and the Mertz Library at the York Botanical Garden. Thank you all so much for joining us, and I hope that you enjoyed the program and that you enjoy the rest of the Brooklyn Book Festival today.